Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
Forget Set Piece FC. I think we're going to become known as Own Goal FC, the way things are going. Welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. On today's show, we're breaking down the 2-1 victory over Brighton and Hove Albion, 3 points that saw Arsenal regain top spot after being temporarily displaced by Manchester City, who had won at Nottingham Forest earlier on in the day. We're going to break the performance down. We're going to discuss some individuals. We're going to take lots of your thoughts, comments, and questions from the live chat, as we always do. And I'm really, really looking forward to it. It's Sunday today. The days are all muddled up around this time of year, I always find. I have to admit, I'm struggling to get up in the mornings as well, because my children, for whatever reason, just don't want to go sleep at night. They're going to bed really, really late. And then there's just peace in the house in the mornings as a result of that. And it's cold and it's dark and I don't want to get out of bed. So that's why we're starting the pod a little bit later. But I promise you, once this weird Christmas/New Year period gets out of the way, we'll go back to our normal time of 10 a.m. live every single weekday. A big thank you to everybody who is joining us in the live chat. It's good to see so many of you with us. Lots of debate, lots of discussion going on in the chat, as there always is. And don't worry, we'll work our way through all of those conversations as we progress through the show. Let's start off with the top line, shall we? Big win, important win, more defensive issues in terms of injuries and problems, and we found a way of winning the game. And I know there'll be people out there that say it was too close for comfort. And given the way we performed, especially in that first half, we should have been far and away in front. And there should never have really been any jeopardy going into that second half. But there was. And, you know, there was a period in the game, I would argue, where Brighton started to take over, where Brighton started to take control in that second half, and where you wondered if we were going to get done with a sucker punch and if we were going to end up with egg on our faces and ruining and regretting the missed chances and missed opportunities in that first half especially. But we got through it. Okay, we got through it. And I think some of the attacking changes that we made just swung the momentum back in our favor and gave us a little bit more impetus, which meant that we could pin Brighton back and we could start to take control and charge of the game again. A game that was at one stage, I don't want to go as far as saying getting away from us, because really, apart from that wonder save that David Raya made, which we'll come on to discuss in more detail, Brighton didn't really do much else in terms of threat. There was the effort from Ayari that came off the foot of the post, and it came to Diego Gomez, and he was able to finish it, but the ball literally dropped on his foot. I've seen some people analysing the defensive sort of maybe issue there when the ball broke, that, you know, he was the first one to react, etc., etc. I think that's really harsh. I think if you do want to analyse the defending and have a discussion about that, I think you need to have a conversation about the lead up to Ayari's effort more than what happens once the ball comes crashing back off the foot of the post. But that's just my view. That's just my opinion. Let's start then, shall we, with the lineup. Let's start with the lineup, because I got to be honest, I couldn't make sense of it when it first came out. Was it a back three? Was it a back four with Declan Rice at right back? Initially, when I first saw it, I wasn't sure who was going to be the fullback. We were having a conversation about it in the press room. Some people thought it might be Zubimendi. I couldn't see that. I didn't see that. I thought that Martin Zubimendi playing at right back would have been a big risk. I don't think he's as mobile as Declan Rice. And obviously, you know, you're asking him to go and play in a position that isn't his own and is so far from it that could potentially cause problems. I think with Declan Rice, obviously, right back is not his position, but because of his athleticism, because of his understanding of the Premier League, because of his dominance in terms of the way he goes out on the pitch and really bosses things, you felt that if there was one player in that selection that could be asked to play out of position and do it to a good enough level, it would be Declan Rice. So you sort of 10, 15 minutes after that team news dropped, that was kind of the conclusion that I reached. And that is, of course, how it turned out to be. We were obviously dealt another blow in the lead up to the game when Riccardo Calafiori had to pull out the starting 11 due to an injury that he suffered in the warm-up. Now, it just feels like these defensive problems are never ending at the moment. And on the one hand, you're buzzing and you're delighted because Big Gabby's back in the squad and that option has returned and he's available to us again. But by that same token, you're frustrated because Calafiori's out, Timber's out, and we don't really know too much detail on that. There are quite a few rumors and whispers around that, all to the tune of it's not serious. It was more about managing workload than anything else, which gives people encouragement that he could be back for Villa as early as Tuesday. But obviously, it's like you give us with the one hand, but you take with the other. That's how it feels at the moment when it comes to Arsenal's defensive problems. So Miles Lewis-Skelly comes into the side at left back. Look, it's not the end of the world. Miles Lewis-Skelly is a really, really good fullback, and he's a player that we grew to love last season. It's not been as fruitful a campaign for him on an individual level this year, I don't think. And I think that's partly down to him being in and out of the side, but partly being down to maybe him just leveling off a little bit. We'll come on to talk about him in a bit, but, what the point I'm trying to make is that when you can bring Miles Lewis-Skelly in and you've got Timber out and you've got Calafiori out, and in an emergency circumstance like that one at the last minute, it kind of highlights and reiterates the fact that we've got a good squad, haven't we? A strong squad. Obviously, Piero Hincapié was back as well, which was a boost also. But look, going into the game, I was wary. Brighton have been a bogey team at Emirates Stadium in years gone by. Going into yesterday's game, we'd met 8 times in Premier League history at the Emirates Stadium, and we'd only won 3 of those games. So Brighton are one of those teams that in the past have been responsible for denying us at really key and important moments. And I know that 3 points is 3 points, but sometimes overcoming the hurdles at which you've previously fallen, and I've talked about this before, it can give you more than just 3 points. It can give you a bit of a psychological boost. And I'm hoping that that's how yesterday's victory will be processed. City winning earlier in the day as well doesn't help. It ramps up the pressure, and we had to go out there and hold our nerve. We had to go out there and regain top spot as we were temporarily, as I mentioned, displaced. But in general, I thought, particularly in the first half, the performance was pretty good. I thought it was a really, really strong first half display. I thought we moved the ball nice and quickly. I thought we figured out that Bukayo Saka was having quite a bit of joy in terms of the space and time he was being given on the ball, and we recognized that, and we were moving the ball forward and through the lines really, really quickly. And you can talk about complex passing patterns all you like, and you can talk about the intricacies of a game, but sometimes it is just simple as get it into your front players, your good players, your talented players, the ones that you feel are the difference makers as early as possible. And Arsenal were very, very good at doing that in that first half yesterday. We are missing a lot of chances, though, and that is a cause for concern. It is a cause for concern because I can sit here and I can say that I'm not totally convinced by Viktor Gyökeres, and again, we'll discuss him individually a bit later on, and I can talk about that till the cows come home. But am I convinced that Gabby Jesus, when he's on the pitch, has got that clinical edge that we need in that centre forward position to make sure that we take the chances that come our way? No, but then this is not a team that was built to only platform 1 or 2 guys. This is a team where the goals are shared around. And I think that responsibility in terms of taking chances, it's something that falls on a number of players. Bukayo Saka's not doing it at the moment. He's not. He's had efforts again yesterday. I thought some of his decision-making at times was wrong. He gets himself into positions. He gets himself sort of in and around the byline, angles against him, and he's taking on shots. I think there's something in that, though. I think there's something in that. And a lot of Viktor Gyökeres fans are not going to like me saying this, but I think that he gets into those positions. He looks up. He doesn't see the centre forward in a reachable position. And so he takes it on. And that is maybe wrong. Maybe you should still play the ball. Maybe you should still try and find him. But I feel like it's Bukayo Saka looking up and saying, where are you? Like, you're hiding at the far post. I can't find you in this scenario, in this situation. I'm going to take on that responsibility and that burden myself. That's kind of how I felt watching Bukayo Saka's display in that first half. Leandro Trossard was a little bit quiet in the first half. He was getting a bit of stick from the Brighton fans over on that far side as I was watching it. Obviously, ex-Brighton player didn't leave in the best way. It wasn't under the greatest circumstances that he departed the football club. But ultimately, I thought that our team was really good in that first half up until that final action. And I know people have accused me in recent episodes of holding some sort of agenda against our centre forward, Viktor Gyökeres. But I thought yesterday was another example of why right now it's not working. And I don't want to say it will never work. And I don't want to say write him off, because I wanted Viktor Gyökeres in the summer. I wanted Viktor Gyökeres in the summer. I really, really did. I was big on it. I was beating that drum saying he's the one, not Benjamin Sesko. I want a proven goal scorer, not another project. I thought that the Benjamin Sesko asking price was ridiculous. I was a massive, massive advocate for the signing of Viktor Gyökeres. But sometimes you have to just say what you see. And what I'm seeing right now is a centre forward that I'm not going to say isn't at that level, because that sounds like I'm completely writing him off. But what I'm seeing right now is a centre forward that isn't producing at that level. And you can say that it's okay for him not to be too involved in the game as long as he scores goals when those chances come along. But do you feel confident that he'll score goals when those chances come along? Because people keep telling me Jesus doesn't score, so why the hell do you want Jesus in the team over Viktor Gyökeres? Well, the truth is, guys, none of them score. None of them score. None of them are, sort of devastating enough in front of goal to justify or warrant being a passenger at times and being a bit of a ghost player in certain scenarios, in certain situations. But at least Gabriel Jesus does the other stuff. At least he knits it all together. His combination play with certain players around him is just second to none. He's buzzing around. He's energetic. He's lively. Viktor Gyökeres, for me yesterday, probably held the ball up twice to good effect. That was about it. Some of his movement in the box frustrated the living daylights out of me. There was an instance where Saka did, and I agree with one of the comments in the chat, by the way, that Saka was a little bit selfish at times in that first half. But I've also explained why I think that was, in terms of him maybe looking up and not feeling that that option is reachable or a viable one. But, there was a scenario again, and it was very, very similar to one that I highlighted a few weeks ago, where, and people came back at me on that and said, well, that was an isolated incident. Stop drawing conclusions based on that isolated incident. But I found you another one, just, a game later, 2 games later, where Saka gets to the byline, flashes it across goal, and what's Viktor Gyökeres doing again? Rather than being on his toes, being sharp, anticipating what's coming, and getting across his man, and working his way into a more central position where he can produce the one-touch finish, he's hiding at the back post again. And that is where I'm really frustrated with Viktor Gyökeres. Okay, I don't think his touch is great. I don't think he's a good distributor of the ball. I don't think he's as quick as people thought he was. I don't think he's shown himself to be as strong as people thought he was. But the thing I keep telling myself is we brought him in to be in the right place at the right time. And he's never in the right place at the right time. And that, for me, is a concern. And I don't think Gabriel Jesus is the finished article as a centre forward. I don't think he ever has been. I think he's always been someone that's just been missing that one bit of his game. But I think when you do other things, you can almost forgive that to a degree. When your all-round game, though, is lacking, like Viktor Gyökeres' game is lacking right now at this moment in time, and I've watched the game back this morning and I feel exactly the same way, then I think there have got to be questions asked. Now, it's not to say he'll never come good and forget about it, but I think sometimes as a manager at this level, you got to do what's best for the team. It doesn't matter what you paid for him. It doesn't matter what his reputation was when he arrived. It doesn't matter how many people online were calling for that number 9 to come in, myself included. If it's not working, it's not working. And I am certain that when Kai Havertz is ready to start a football match, Viktor Gyökeres will be put on the bench. And again, we keep talking about the strength in depth that we have and the squad that we have. I don't think Martinelli's a bad player, but he doesn't start every game. I don't think Eze's a bad player, but he doesn't start every game. I don't think Madueke is a bad player, but he doesn't start every game. Viktor Gyökeres will very, very quickly find himself being an option rather than the option for Arsenal. I'm confident in my sort of view and belief on that. But anyway, first half, I thought generally, as I said, the performance was really good. We should have been way out in front. The stats suggest that, we really did pepper Brighton at times, and they didn't have a shot at goal in that first half. Arsenal, I think, had 12 attempts, I want to say, in that first half off the top of my head, just remembering when I was looking at it at the time. And Brighton had none. So it was very, very much one-way traffic. But, there's a few people that are trying to keep calm and trying to keep a lid on it. And I understand, because I'm not losing my head about it. But my point is this. If you're saying, don't worry, the chances will come. Don't worry, the chances are coming, the goals will come. I think you're overlooking one of the most important elements of football, which is putting the ball in the back of the net. In fact, it's the most important element. It's more important to score goals than anything else in this sport. And I think, we are not quite there. We're not quite at that level that we need to be in the final third. And that is making these games at times too close for comfort. The margins are not big enough. And I'm not saying that Manchester City's margins are always big, by the way. You look at them against Leeds, where they were 2-0 up, 2-2, and then they had to go and win it late on. You look at them against Fulham, where they were 5-1 up, and Fulham came back to 5-4. And Manchester City just about avoided the embarrassment of throwing away such a commanding and huge lead. But I always get the impression that when Manchester City are playing, they're going to score. And I don't always get that impression with this Arsenal team. Now, without the defensive issues and without the defensive problems, I look at this Arsenal team and I think, well, we are less likely to concede. We are less likely to give things away. And because of that, our margins don't need to be as big. It's Elliot from Arsenal Vision always says this, and I've said this many times, and I always quote it back to him because it's absolutely his point and it's where I heard it. So it'd be wrong of me not to say it. He said, Arsenal's identity is their defensive solidity. And he's absolutely right. But while that is being tested, there is a need for the other end of the pitch to become more productive. And there is a need for those guys to step up in order to ensure that those weaknesses that we have at the back, because we don't have our best available at this moment in time, they have to be, those weaknesses have to be protected. And that's where we're seeing the margins get smaller and smaller. Look, if you want to look glass half full, we're winning the games. And that is good because we're not at our best. Mikel Arteta, I think, described us as being in survival mode when it comes to that back line. And the fact that we're able to get the results that we are in survival mode is something that should breed encouragement. Absolutely. But I don't think there's anything wrong with coming away from a game and looking at how you can be better and how you can improve. And there's a difference between that and saying it's all broken, everybody's rubbish, get rid of all of them. That's not what we're doing here, just to be clear. Okay? We are simply trying to find ways and understand ways in which Arsenal can improve because we know what standard is required to win this league. Obviously, we break the deadlock after 14 minutes. Really, really good goal from Martin Odegaard. We'll come on to break that goal down in just a moment or so. We're going to take a short pause. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Don't go anywhere.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Lots still to break down, lots still to get into. We're going to continue to work our way through the happenings of yesterday's game. I'm not going to say it's an interesting game to analyze because I don't think it was. I think it's a frustrating game to analyze, but there are some points that I want to make and some points that we still got to work our way through. Let's talk about Martin Odegaard's goal. This was your typical Martin Odegaard finish. Now, what do I mean by that? So Martin Odegaard, having worked the ball out to the right-hand side, as Arsenal did in that scenario, takes up that position around about the corner of the penalty box, just inside of it. That's where he likes to work. That's where he likes to operate. And when the ball comes into him, Martin Odegaard's first touch gives people the impression that he's looking for that curled effort in towards the far corner. That's the impression that he always gives. But very often we see Martin Odegaard sort of set himself that way and then use his kind of ability to shape his body to then drag it back, his effort across the goal towards the near post rather than going to the far. And often that catches goalkeepers out, particularly if he catches it with a bit of venom and with a bit of power. And he's done exactly that and caught Verbruggen out and broken the deadlock. And it was crazy that I'm on air yesterday, 14 minutes into the game, and I'm saying, Martin Odegaard has got his first Arsenal goal of the season. You're kind of sitting there and you're going, is that right? Like, I had to check myself. I said it because I was pretty confident that that was the case. Obviously it was. But then I'm sitting there and I'm going, it can't be. We're at the end of December and Martin Odegaard hasn't scored yet. I know he's had his injury problems, but he's played enough football to have at least contributed a goal. And I'm quickly scrambling around on the internet to double check that. Remarkable to me that he hadn't scored up until that point. But what I want to say is this. It's a great goal. It's a great finish. It's typical Martin Odegaard. It's trademark Martin Odegaard. And hopefully that will give him the confidence to go on and try those efforts and those things more and more often, right? But I would still be praising Martin Odegaard this morning, even if he hadn't scored, because his performance all round was brilliant. He was everywhere. People have been moaning recently about him dropping too deep, myself included. He dropped deep when he needed to, but he also managed to get himself into those attacking positions quickly enough and sharply enough to mean that his dropping deep was not detrimental to our attacking power. He produced some unbelievable bits of footwork in the middle of the park to shake off defenders, to get away from Brighton's press at times, to bypass it and set Arsenal on their way. There were some lovely first-time balls around the corner, in behind, out wide, through the middle, switches of play. I just thought this was an all-round really good Martin Odegaard performance. And the goal, obviously, brilliant. And you always feel like in games like this, the first goal for Arsenal, perhaps more than other teams, is so important. But I have to say, for me, I thought his all-round game yesterday was outstanding. And I really want to highlight that because we have sat here at times and said Martin Odegaard's not been at the level. We have sat here at times and said Martin Odegaard's not really doing it for me at this moment in time, and he needs to improve. And if he doesn't, then people are going to be calling for Eberechi Eze to start ahead of him. Eze's fallen out of favour a little bit, I would argue, over the last couple of weeks, but that's because Odegaard's back. It's in part because maybe Eze hasn't done what Mikel Arteta's been expecting, but I think it's in part because Mikel Arteta really likes and rates Martin Odegaard, and he gave him a bit of time to rediscover his form and find his feet again after that long injury layoff. And yesterday, we kind of got the fruits of that labour, didn't we? So fingers crossed that Martin Odegaard that we saw yesterday is the Martin Odegaard that we're going to take forward with us into the next few months, where it really is going to get difficult and really is going to get tough. And listen, that Aston Villa game on Tuesday is massive. It is massive. I was hoping that they dropped points yesterday. They didn't. No such luck. Their brilliant run continues. And they are, what I was describing earlier on, one of those psychological hurdles at which we've fallen previously. They denied us some really important points in title races in recent history. We went there a few weeks ago and we thought we were going to get out of there with a decent point, and we ended up leaving completely empty-handed because of a last-minute late goal. So Aston Villa are one of those teams that are going to cause us issues, that are going to cause us problems. And I feel like if we can come out of this Christmas, New Year period, this little period in between, with 6 points, we're in an unbelievably strong position, given the fixtures that we've already played. If we lose to Villa, or we drop points against Villa, then you start to wonder how this is all going to transpire. And I'm not going to say it'll be over and we're going to lose it, but I feel like this little period was really, really important. We've overcome one of those games, but the hardest one is still to come. And that's why Villa feels absolutely massive in the coming days. Let's just take this super chat from the Naked Ape. That's an interesting name. before I forget and before it disappears. He says, if we fail to win silverware this season, do you see Arteta trying his luck somewhere else? This is an interesting angle on the question, because normally I get asked, would you replace Mikel Arteta if we don't win silverware this season? This is a slightly different question, which is, do I see Arteta getting up and wanting to go and try his luck somewhere else? Well, Arteta needs to sign a new contract if he's going to stay at Arsenal for the long term. Okay, so there is that little bit of uncertainty there, I suppose. Knowing, and look, I don't know Mikel Arteta personally, but I am in a fair few of his press conferences. I have interviewed him a lot over the last 3 years. And he is someone who is quite pleasant generally. Like, you get little exchanges with him while, for example, if you're doing a radio interview and it's going to be live, while you're waiting for the live bit, he's normally quite friendly, and you have that little bit of interaction. Knowing what I know about him, I'd be shocked if Mikel Arteta was to up and leave off his own accord before achieving something at Arsenal. I feel like he will feel it's unfinished business. I feel like he would feel that there's a job still to be done. And he's not an old manager. He's not in his 70s. You know, he's not in a stage in his career where he's thinking about winding down. He's got a long managerial career ahead of him if he wants it. So I don't think he would get up and leave. No, not before the job is done. Not before the job is done. We're going to take some of your questions in a minute. There's some interesting ones coming through the chat, but I just want to finish off on a couple of points before I do that, so I'll make sure that I don't miss any of the key bits I want to say. I've kind of talked about Gyökeres already. I don't want to go down that road again. Obviously, our early second half goal should have given us some breathing space, should have put us in a place and in a position where we felt a lot more comfortable, a lot more confident, and we should have seen the game out. But of course, we made it nervy because we ended up conceding a goal that I think was avoidable. I think some of our defending down that left-hand side, it was avoidable. I think Brighton targeted Miles Lewis-Skelly. Yakuba Minte coming on made a big, big difference. He was a bit more direct, a bit more of a live threat for Brighton. And I think we struggled to cope with him at times. And they get a bit of fortune with the way the ball comes off the post and falls straight to Diego Gomez, who scores 2-1. But our second goal, you know, people are going to say we're extremely lucky right now in terms of the way the own goal stuff is working. Own goal again, ole ole, was the chant from some Arsenal fans yesterday. Four own goals have gone our way at the Emirates Stadium in our last 3 home games. So yeah, in that sense, we are getting the rub of the green. I've always said it, you need a bit of luck. Sometimes being lucky is better than being talented, it seems. And it has gone our way. And, you know, what I will say is, while there is an element of fortune there, of course there is, you cannot underestimate the impact that good quality deliveries in terms of our set pieces are having there, right? They're the type of deliveries into the box that cause confusion, give people decisions to make, require people to attack them because they're so fearful of what we are as an attacking set piece team. And so, for example, Jorginho Rutter yesterday, it's a terrible own goal. Like, he doesn't even need to make contact with it. I wouldn't be surprised if Verbruggen comes and just catches that off the back of it. But I think we've created this thing where we keep talking about set pieces and everybody else keeps talking about us and our set pieces. We've almost created this like aura, if you like, whereby teams are so fearful of not dealing with the first ball that they make rash and silly decisions, like Jorginho Rutter did yesterday, and he ends up guiding it beyond his goalkeeper and into the back of the net. So I'm not trying to downplay the luck element here. There is a huge element of that. But I think our set piece record and the reputation that we have developed in that sense is causing defenders and opposition players to get caught in two minds, to feel like they have to deal with something that maybe against other teams they might allow to just develop and see how it goes. And I think that's what you saw there. Fabian Herzler came into the interview room yesterday and talked about the fact that his team weren't brave enough, weren't bold enough, didn't play with enough courage in that first half. And what changed in the second half was that, yes, he made a couple of changes, but I think his point was that Brighton stopped being so passive in that second half and decided to have a bit of a go at us. And that then culminated in a better second half performance from them. Their second half performance was much, much better than their first. But Arsenal's second half performance was much, much worse than the first. We weren't anywhere near as dominant. We weren't anywhere near as in control. Can you put that down to fatigue? If you're talking about the last 20 minutes of a game, I think you can. I think you can. I think at this stage in the season where the schedule's been jam-packed and super busy, you can forgive that a little bit. And that's why you have a squad and you can make 5 changes to freshen it up. But I thought our period of decline was probably earlier than that. Like it probably started at around about 55 minutes just after we scored the second goal, and it lasted until about maybe the 70th minute. And then I thought we did a really, really good job, largely because of the substitutes, of taking back control of the game. And barring that David Raya save, which was outstanding, the sort of the leap that he makes and then the strong hand he gets on it, it's just incredible. That's one of David Raya's best Arsenal saves. I don't want to say it's the best because I haven't sat down and gone through the previous ones to make such a bold claim, but it certainly feels like a really, really important one because there's no doubt in my mind that was destined for the top corner. I was right behind it, and I thought that we were in big shit then. So fair play to David Raya, brilliant save, brilliant stop. That's why he's there. You know, top goalkeepers go through a game without really doing much at times, and then have to be called into action and have to produce in that moment. And David Raya did exactly that. But going back to my point, our decline maybe came a little bit too early for me, for me to simply go, it's fatigue. Now, maybe fatigue played a big part in that, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is that it came too early for me to excuse it or pass it off as just fatigue and nothing to worry about. I think we'd just become a bit passive ourselves. And people keep saying that it's Mikel Arteta's fault when we do that, when we drop off, when we start to give the opposition time and space and we don't execute our press in the same way. And that allows them to get a foothold in the game and grow in confidence, etc., etc. If you are at the stadium, yeah, and you know, I know not everybody's lucky enough to be at the stadium. I know loads of you that watch and listen to this are from all over the world. And I know that what you see in terms of what's happening in the stadium is limited by what is captured on the TV cameras, right? But if you are at Emirates Stadium anytime soon, I encourage you, the next time you think that Arsenal are dropping off unnecessarily, the next time that you think Arsenal are falling into a low block themselves, please look at Mikel Arteta. That is not a guy that's happy with that. He is waving his arms. He's running up and down the technical area. Sometimes he leaves the technical area and ends up closer to the corner flag. That's the reality of it. But he is constantly trying to drive that intensity and trying to get his team up the pitch. He doesn't want his team to sink deep. He wants his team to defend high up. He's happy with there being a 30, 40 yard gap in between our backline and our goalkeeper. That's why he's got a goalkeeper like David Raya, who he feels can marshal those spaces. It's not a deliberate thing. And so when we say, oh, it's the manager, I think sometimes we need to look at the players as well and say, why are you dropping off? Why is no one on the pitch going, stop this? We are sinking deeper and deeper and deeper. We need to get up the pitch. We need to squeeze up. Why is no one taking ownership? Why is that only coming from the manager? Would be my question in scenarios like that. A couple of other players I want to give a massive shout out to. Gabriel Jesus. I've already talked about it. I don't think he's the best goal scorer in the world, but he brings an energy and a cohesion to our forward line that Viktor Gyökeres at the moment just can't. Him and Martinelli, that combination, I don't know what it is. It's like when Martinelli's on the pitch with Jesus, his level increases and Jesus's increases too. That is a combination that just works so beautifully well for me. And I think sometimes we're so focused on tactics and shapes and systems and coaching instructions that we overlook one of the most beautiful things that football has to offer, which is just pure and natural chemistry between footballers. And those two have that in an abundance. You got to give a shout out to Declan Rice, who played at right back yesterday and played that role incredibly well. Incredibly well. You know, to be asked to do that when you are arguably the team's most important midfield player, and to take on that role with such a good attitude, such a positive attitude, to give your absolute all, to make sure that you're not foregoing your defensive responsibilities, but you're also contributing further up the pitch in every way that you can, to show that engine late on in the game like he did at one stage yesterday is just remarkable. And I think Declan Rice is, you know, we hear this phrase bandied about a lot, but he is truly a manager's dream because you can pick him in any position you like, whether it's at centre midfield, whether it's at 6 or 8, whether it's at centre back, whether it's at right back. You could probably even stick him at centre forward and ask him to do a job, right? You can put him anywhere and you know that he is going to show a willingness, a top attitude, and he has got a level of competence anywhere on the pitch because he's such an athlete. He's so dominant, and he's, I think, improving as a player in terms of his intelligence year upon year upon year. And the step up for him has been massive coming to Arsenal, because I think he's, on an individual level, gone to heights that I didn't think he was capable of. Like, I liked him before we signed him. When we got him, I was really pleased and really chuffed, and I thought it could be a game changer. But I didn't think he would be as dominant and as good an all-rounder as he's turned out to be at Arsenal. And that is a testament to him more than anyone else. You can sit there and say it's the coaching, and yeah, of course the coaches deserve some credit for that, but I think you've got to be smart enough to take on that instruction, to process it. You've got to be good enough to develop yourself, and I think Declan Rice is all of those things. I suppose that's kind of everything that I want to touch on. I think we're going to take another short pause, and when we come back, we'll dive into the chat box and we'll take some of your questions. So if you've got questions, if you've got thoughts that you want to have read out or have discussed on the pod, make sure you drop them into the live chat now. If they were already in the live chat during my long monologue, I've probably missed them. So get them in again. If you put a Q at the start of your question, that helps me pick them out from the crowd, and it allows me to just filter through the chat a little bit quicker and a little bit easier. So get that done now. Get those in. We'll be back with you in just a second, and we'll take on some of your questions and thoughts.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. Like and subscribe. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Good to see so many of you with us bright and early on this Sunday morning. If you haven't done so already, make sure you leave a like on the video. There's nowhere near enough likes on the video at the moment. I don't know why. I don't know what's put people off liking the video. Come on, you know what you're going to get. There's hundreds of you watching, and there's only 58 likes on the board. Come on. Do the thing. Hit the like button. It really, really does help. Also, subscribe to the channel if you are new. All of that really, really does help. And if you'd like to become a patron, you can do so. There is a Patreon piece dropping this evening. I'm yet to decide on what the subject's going to be. I feel like it's about time we did a positive patron piece. So I think there's a good chance it will be a breakdown of Martin Odegaard's performance in a lot more detail, because one of the key things that I've already touched on, but I want to explore a little bit more in a patron bit, is for weeks now, we've been bemoaning the fact that he keeps dropping deep. I want to talk about the differences in terms of how he was able to drop deep and still have an impact at the other end of the pitch. How was that possible? What's changed? What gave him that flexibility and that ability to make the sort of impact that he did in Arsenal's all-round game yesterday? So we'll get there. Offside Trap with Grande says, hit the like button even if you feel Harry is not being honest. What am I not being honest about? I want to hear. Let me know. I want to know. What's your thoughts? What am I not being honest about? Happy to answer any of your questions. Get them in the live chat. Don't just throw sweeping statements in like that. Give me something to work with. Give us something to talk about. Like, subscribe. Check us out on Patreon. Patreon.com/the Chronicles of a Gooner. The link is in the description below. Sign up now and you will get that episode a little bit later on today. It is an episode that will be exclusively available to our patrons. Guitar Solo says, has anyone else noticed that when City scrape a win, the media call it resilience, but when we do it, they say it's not sustainable? Absolutely. And it frustrates the living daylights out of me. We are going to, as Arsenal fans, overanalyze our team. We are going to sometimes worry about things that maybe we shouldn't be worrying about. We are going to overblow the concerns, and we're going to at times amplify those more than the positives. But that's natural because we're all so desperate to win. We're all so desperate to see our team get over the line. When we do it internally, I don't really have an issue with it. I just think that it's really glaringly obvious that there are different narratives around different clubs in the wider and mainstream media, and that really frustrates me. I was on BBC Radio London yesterday, and former Manchester United and England player Paul Parker, who's won a title, knows what it's all about. He talked about Arsenal not having the mettle, and that he's not seeing a team at the moment that that are going to go on and become champions. And I had to challenge, I had to push back. I said, well, what is that based on? Because literally, when we're talking about Manchester City, and I know they've done it in the past, that's the only thing. But if you're analyzing the here and now, okay, you're looking at the here and now, what is the difference? When they scrape a win, it's, oh, Manchester City are resolute and they're resilient and they know how to win. But when Arsenal do it, it's, oh, this isn't sustainable. They're rubbish. They're going to crash and burn. And it is frustrating and it is annoying. It is really, really annoying. The only thing I agree, which gives Manchester City an edge for me, is like right now, today, if I'm looking at the two teams, and I said that I expect Arsenal to win, etc., and I absolutely do. But the only thing that I can understand would give Manchester City an edge in these discussions, or the only two things. Number one is the experience, right? Experience does count for something. I don't think it's the be all and end all, but it does count for something. And the other thing is that I have more confidence in their firepower up front. But when we get everybody back, which we're close to doing now, we've got much more defensive solidity. And so it will be attack versus defense in a way, right? That's the way it's going to be. That's our identity. We're comparing ourselves to them in terms of the final third. But if you compare ourselves at the other end of the pitch, then there is no comparison. So that's the difference, I think. And it's just a different style. You could argue it's a clash of styles. We could argue that we're the ugly style for once. When all those years under Arsene Wenger, we were beauty and someone else was the beast. Maybe we're the beast this time around, but that doesn't matter as long as we achieve what we want. Gunnar Nicole says, do you think Rice will go elsewhere if we don't win some silverware? I wouldn't blame him, to be honest. He's worked like a Trojan. Declan Rice has that look of a guy that's saying, I'm going to win something this season. I don't care what people say or what's going. I'm going to put that extra in. I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to be a difference maker. Look, at this stage, if I sat here and said that I'm worried about any of our star players upping and leaving right now, I'd be lying. And I also don't think that as a professional footballer, you know, the thought might cross your mind at points and at times after a disappointing defeat, after a setback, after a knockback. But I don't think it's something that those guys will be actively focusing on right now. If they are, it means they're not focused on the task at hand. In which case, if we do fail to win something, they'll have to look at themselves and say, well, when I should have been focused, when I should have been all in, when I should have been completely and totally invested, instead I was worrying about my future, which maybe has let my teammates down. I don't see that. I don't see the cracks in the armor yet. DJ Marcus Anthony says, do you think Arteta should chill a bit on the sidelines and allow players to express themselves rather than micromanaging their every move on the pitch? We've had this debate before and this discussion before. Do I think at times he micromanages? Yes. But I don't have a problem with him constantly being there to give the message of don't switch off, up the intensity, don't sink, which are the messages I kind of took from the flailing of his arms and all the rest of it yesterday. It depends what that message is. And the truth is, mate, that we won't really ever know the minutiae and the detail of that instruction that he's passing on. Let's take on a couple more messages. I'm not skipping people because I don't want to answer your questions. I'm just trying to pick questions that are different to the ones or sort of that touch on other themes to the ones that we've already covered, just to avoid repetition. Jid says, do you think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of Odegaard's role? There's this misconception that his job is to score and assist, which it isn't. I think when you play in this team in that position, you have to score and assist. Like at what rate, I think is up for debate and discussion. But I do think that in people's desperation to tick those two boxes, they miss some of the other stuff he does. And I think that's wrong. I think that's wrong to answer your question. Is this what the offside trap with Grande was saying I was being dishonest about? He says the difference is Pep and we have Arteta. When have I ever denied that Pep Guardiola is the better manager? When have I ever denied that? There is an argument, if you want to make it, that Pep Guardiola is the greatest manager of all time. Mikel Arteta's record doesn't stack up to that. And it probably, if we're being honest, hand on heart, never will. It probably never will. So if you're suggesting that I'm being dishonest because I'm pretending that Arteta is at the same level as Pep Guardiola, then you're literally arguing with yourself. And we get that a lot in this chat box, but I promise you, I've never said that Mikel Arteta is better than Pep Guardiola, nor will I until the day that Mikel Arteta even achieves half of what Pep Guardiola has. And he's not even close to it. He's not even close to it. Leroy Williams says, is it just me, or does the opponent's defensive line jump 20 yards higher the second Gyökeres is subbed off? It's like his presence is the only thing pinning them back. So I've seen this observation going around on X this morning. And I'm not going to say I disagree with it per se, but I also think you have to factor in game state, right? So when was Viktor Gyökeres subbed off yesterday? Let's have a quick look. I want to get the specific minute. That's why I'm just taking a quick look. Hold on a second. So we went 2-0 up on 52 minutes, okay? And Viktor Gyökeres went off on 71 minutes. Well, you know, at that time, when Viktor Gyökeres went off, Brighton had managed to bring it back to 2-1 and were chasing an equalising goal. Of course, their defensive line was going to jump up. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm not dismissing the point. I do think that there is something in that, yeah, Viktor Gyökeres constantly being on the shoulder of the last man, it does push teams back. It does pin teams back. It does give us a bit more control in certain areas of the pitch. But I think you have to factor in the game state here as well. You have to look at the fact that Brighton were at half the deficit and were going after that equalising goal. And so naturally, they're going to jump up a few yards, aren't they? They're going to jump up a few yards. Offside trap with Grande says, that's not why I called you dishonest. Well, why did you then? Come on, I want to hear it. I want to have the discussion. I want to have the debate, but you haven't provided, as far as I can see anyway. Maybe I've missed it because the chat is popping off. But let me know why you say that. I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear so that we can have an opportunity to debate it and to discuss it. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, make sure you leave a like on the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're new as well. That really, really does help. If you're watching this back on playback, leave us one of those hype thingies. And if you're interested in becoming a Chronicles of a Gooner patron and supporting the pod and getting access to additional content, as well as every episode ad-free, you can do so via the link in the description. I'm going to take one more question while I pray that we get this reason for my dishonesty so that we can have that discussion before I sign out, because I have promised the kids I'm going to take them out for brunch, lunch type thing. What have we got? Just scrolling through. Thomas says, can we expect Noni and Eze against Villa? Would be strange if they don't play again. What do you see Saka being replaced going into that game? I don't. Do you see Martin Odegaard being dropped after the performance that he put in yesterday? I don't. So I'm not expecting those guys to start. Could they play? Sure, of course they could. I thought Eze had a stinker, by the way, at Villa away. So I know it's going to be a different game and all the rest of it. And if Eze does play, I'd imagine it's not going to be on that left-hand side. But I would imagine that the starting 11 is going to be pretty similar to the one that we saw. Now, obviously, because of the quick turnaround, there is a need to use the squad. There is a need, of course, to keep people fresh and to keep things fresh as much as possible. But yeah, I don't think that those two guys will start. That's just my opinion. Final one. I am Safi says, is there an argument to be made that Saka hasn't been as effective this season? I feel like his decision-making recently has been off. Yeah, 4 goals and 3 assists in the Premier League. I mean, 7 goal contributions in 15 appearances is not bad. 1 goal in the Carabao Cup, 2 goals in the Champions League. It's not been like a disastrous season for Bukayo Saka, but obviously he's set the bar really, really high, hasn't he? And I don't think he's living up to that at this moment in terms of outputs. But I do feel in recent weeks that his performances have been good, and that his performances have been important, and I think he's taken the game to the opposition and posed a constant threat. I do agree on the decision-making point. I absolutely do. But I go back to what I said a little bit earlier on in the pod, and it's probably a good way to finish. When you see a player seemingly not using an option, not choosing a particular pass. Often, the default position of those analyzing and watching it say the default position is this: it's selfishness. Sometimes you have to think about why they're not passing. We've all played the game to some level, to some degree. Why would you not pass to someone? I had this. I used to play as a centre forward. And I always remember that when I'd get the ball, sometimes I'd drop deep, I'd get the ball, I'd turn and I'd run towards the opposition's penalty box. I always looked for my left winger first. Always. Every single time. You know why? Because I trusted him more than I did the right winger. I trusted my left winger implicitly. We had a really good connection. It's not to say my right winger wasn't a good player. He absolutely was. But my left winger and me, we had a bit of a Jesus Martinelli type. We weren't as good as that, obviously, but a type of understanding where he knew where I was going to be. I knew where he was going to be. I knew what run he was going to make. Sometimes I'd play the pass before I'd even looked, and vice versa. Sometimes he'd deliver the ball into the box, knowing where I was going to be. There was that connection. And I think if that isn't there, if that's missing, then that can lead to you making decisions that can be perceived as selfish. So I think you can say that Saka's been a little bit selfish, but at the same time, I think when you're about to make that kind of accusation, if you like, I think sometimes you have to hit the pause button and think, why first? Offside trap with Grande has responded. I don't know if this is what he says I've been dishonest about, because he's replied 2 or 3 times now. And I don't know if, and then when I've replied, he said, no, that's not what I was talking about. I don't know if this is it. But he says, we can clearly see Arteta does not know how to utilize our new players, apart from Zubi. Instead of micro-analyzing the new players, why don't we analyze why it's not working? Well, I think with Viktor Gyökeres, as we've often said, I think it's a bit of both. I think it's a bit of both, isn't it? It's a bit of the team not necessarily catering to his needs, but it's also a bit of him not doing what's required. And I'm starting to think over the last few weeks, when I was giving him the benefit of the doubt of we're not used to playing with him, he's not getting the service. Over the last few weeks, I think we've seen that actually that is not the only issue. That's not being dishonest. That's me putting across an opinion that I think is very, very valid. Wes Bird says, Harry, I feel that it's vital for us going forward this season psychologically that we beat Villa on Tuesday, or there will be a big concern and potentially a meltdown from our fan base. I completely agree. Tuesday feels absolutely huge. And we are going to start building up to that game, of course, from tomorrow. Great time to leave it. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner. Don't forget to leave a like on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, leave us a review. And if you want to go one further, you can become a patron. And there's a patron piece coming your way this evening. So do join us over there. Your support is very, very much appreciated. You can sign up for less than the price of a cup of coffee. You get ad-free access to all of our episodes, as well as bonus content that is exclusively available to our patrons only. Thank you so much. I will see you all soon. Until the next one, have a wonderful day. Up the Arsenal. Goodbye.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners.